Chapter 541. Xianxia, Don't Cry. Xianxia no longer drank. Over the years he had become unwilling to drink, because he was afraid of getting drunk. Once he became drunk, he would remember his master, his eldest senior brother, his second senior brother, and his youngest junior brother. This longing was pure and plain torture to him. It would make him wake up from his sleep in tears, make him drown in loneliness as he looked at the darkness around him and remembered just how alone and at a loss he was. He seldom fell asleep now, and would rather not dream, because he was afraid of becoming immersed in the happiness of the past and unwilling to wake up. If he truly could not wake up, then the ninth summit might fall into trouble. He no longer peeped either, because he had already grown up. He no longer had the strength to do such a thing, because there was no longer anyone else in this area besides him. If there was any, then it would be the hidden heaven gate in the sky. It was a place he hated with everything he had. He would never forget how Heaven Gate had abandoned the great frozen plains when the calamity came upon them, forcing an innumerable amount of the disciples in the mountains to leave. They were made to wander without a place to call home, and he had no idea whether they were still alive or dead. He had to watch the mountains collapse, watch Heaven Gate descending on them and making all the factions of power on the ground come under their jurisdiction, and watch the ninth summit slowly be drowned as the glacier melted. He would never forget the day his eldest senior brother's isolation grounds went under water. Tears had fallen from his eyes then, but he could only move backwards, and could only continue retreating until his cave abode was gone, until even his youngest junior brother's cave abode disappeared under water. At that moment, he cried again. He could not stop any of this. He could only continue moving backwards, could only watch water drowning even his second senior brother's house, the plants and flowers dying, until only 1,000 feet of the entire ninth summit was left. The lonely mountain was left with a lonely person. He struggled for years, and he had no idea for how much longer still he had to continue struggling. Perhaps he would not be able to continue for long. With tears falling from his eyes, Xianxia sat on the mountain. He looked at the world in the distance, then at the sparkling seawater, and more tears fell from his eyes. Those tears contained his pain, his anger, and even more so, his longing. He knew that if Heaven Gates Baisu had not harbored special feelings for the ninth summit and loved his missing youngest junior brother, he would be in an even worse trouble. He also knew that Baisu only had very little influence in Heaven Gate. Even if her father had a lot of power in Heaven Gate in the past, but the thing that had happened during these past few years had caused him to be badly injured, causing his power and influence to fall greatly as well. Xianxia would never forget that sight. It was something that was largely connected to a person called Xianxia, who had walked out of freezing sky cave when the glacier turned into an ocean. It was something that no one expected, not even Baisu's father. Xianxia had become incredibly powerful when he walked out of the glacier, and from then onwards, he became one of the powerful warriors within Heaven Gate. His existence was also the reason why the ninth summit was in such a difficult situation. As Xianxia cried, he touched his back and started mumbling in a voice that only he could hear. "Master, I'm at my limit. Eldest senior brother and second senior brother went to Eastern Wastelands. Youngest junior brother, where are you? Did you know? Our home is almost gone. Do you still remember the ninth summit's principles? Kill those who have harmed even a single plant of ninth summit. Kill those who have harmed even a single follower of ninth summit. Kill all the berserkers of the tribe of the person who harmed even a single disciple of the ninth summit." As he spoke, more tears fell from his eyes, and his heart clenched in pain. These are the ninth summit's principles, but our summit is no longer here. Are we even considered a part of it anymore? Xianxia continued crying. On that lonely mountain, the sobs of a man echoed in the air. Men do not cry easily, because their cries sounded horrid to the ears, because their sobs symbolize weakness, but, when they reach their limit, their cries become filled with their despair towards life. Those sobs filled with despair would no longer be unpleasant, but would be filled with grief. Xianxia wept silently, until a sigh came from behind him, along with a gentle, familiar voice. "Xianxia, don't cry." When that voice spoke, a hand landed on Xianxia's shoulder. The hand that represented warmth caused him to lurch forward, and when he turned his head around while shivers wrecked his body, he saw a face that for long had only existed in his memories. Youngest, junior brother. Hu Zi looked at Su Ming with a dumbfounded expression, and his mind went blank. He could not tell whether this was reality or just a figment of his imagination. As he trembled, he slowly lifted his hand and pressed his palm on the hand Su Ming had placed on his shoulder, then grabbed it tightly. When he was certain that the hand was truly there, Hu Zi suddenly began shouting at Su Ming. "You're only back now. Only the peak of the 9th summit remains. Did you know that? Eldest senior brother went to search for master in Eastern Wastelands because we didn't know whether he was still alive. And while we were waiting in anxiety, second senior brother left for Eastern Wastelands because he was worried. I wanted to go as well, but he wouldn't let me. He asked me to protect the 9th summit. He asked me to stay here and wait for you so that you'd know the 9th summit is still here and that our home is still around." As Hu Zi roared, tears fell from his eyes. "It's been 20 years. 20 years. You've been missing for 20 years, and you're only back now. Do you still remember that the 9th summit is your home? Do you have any idea just how often Master sighed and looked towards the land of the shamans? Do you have any idea how dejected he looked when he did that? Do you know why eldest senior brother came out of isolation earlier and went to the land of the shamans? He didn't go for the shamans, he went to search for you. Did you know about these? Did you? Did you know that second senior brother took care of your cave abode and rearranged it so that it looked as if you never left? The plants and herbs he planted on your platform are still around. At that time, when he planted these flowers, he had even turned around and said to me while smiling that these flowers could protect you so that you could train at ease on this platform. Because he knew that you loved sitting there and exercising your breathing. Did you know about all these?" Hu Zi stood up in agitation and shouted at Su Ming without stop, just like how a man who had suppressed his burdens for a long time would explode when he finally saw his family. Su Ming remained silent, and his face was filled with grief. He looked at Hu Zi, listened to his furious cries silently, and he continued listening until Hu Zi, at some point in his rant, went up to hug him. "Youngest junior brother, I missed you. Eldest senior brother also missed you, and so did second senior brother. Master looked so much older before he left, you know? I know that he went to the land of the shamans to look for you. But he didn't manage to find you. Youngest junior brother, just where did you go? Why are you back only now?" Hu Zi wept as he hugged Su Ming. His voice became softer with each word, and in the end, only one sentence was left echoing in the air. "How could you come back only now?" "Third senior brother, I'm back." Su Ming hugged Hu Zi and spoke softly. Tears fell down his eyes, too. Hu Zi's voice became weaker with each passing moment, and eventually, his whole body sagged against Su Ming's. He was too tired, both in body and mind. He had been protecting the 9th summit alone without sleeping and drinking, enduring the loneliness quietly and silently. At this moment, the instant he saw Su Ming, he relaxed. Just like that, he closed his eyes while in his embrace, and gradually, the snores Su Ming was so familiar with rang through the air. He held Hu Zi in his arms, and even when his senior brother's snores grew so loud that they sounded like thunder roaring, not a hint of impatience could be found on Su Ming. His lips curled up into a smile. This was his senior brother, a brother who would do everything for Su Ming without regard for his own safety, and also a brother whom Su Ming could give up everything for. He was a little simple, but he was not foolish. He had some unique hobbies, but he was a sincere person. He had a horrible temper, but he was a person who would stand before his junior brother to defend him. Because he always believed that he was the senior brother and he had to protect his junior brother. Similarly, he would also stand behind his second senior brother, because he believed that his second senior brother would do the same thing and defend him, and that was also the truth. This was the 9th summit. "Senior brother, I'm back. You don't have to defend the 9th summit alone now. I will make all the people who harbor ill will towards the 9th summit to only have time to worry about themselves from now on." A hint of killing intent appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and that killing intent was much stronger than when he was in Scour Sieve Island. After all, he had done everything in Scour Sieve Island for someone else, but over here, he was doing this for his master, his senior brothers, for his own home. "I will let everyone know about the principles of the 9th summit," Su Ming stated calmly, then carried Hu Zi back to their master's cave abode. He placed his senior brother on the ground, lifted his right hand and pointed at the center of his brows, sending out a warm wave of aura into his body. That aura would provide him with nourishment so that his fatigue over the years could be relieved. He was too tired. He had not slept like this for far too long. Right then, as dreams visited his sleep, he started drooling at the corner of his lips. There was even a smile on his face, and it looked as if he had encountered something happy in his dreams. Su Ming looked at Hu Zi quietly, at the signs of age on his face, and what appeared before his eyes was the honest figure in his memories, along with this very same figure taking him along to peek at their second senior brother while they hid behind a big rock. I'm not bragging here, youngest junior brother. If we talk about intelligence, is there anyone else who is smarter than me on this mountain? None. The words Hu Zi had said in the past and the smug expression he had when he said them appeared in Su Ming's head. Let me tell you, eldest senior brother is always in isolation. Our second senior brother is the most interesting out of the lot. He always thinks someone is stealing his plants. Be quiet. Don't make a sound. I'll take you to the 7th summit tonight. We'll go see those girls today. Let me tell you, youngest junior brother, you have to be smart. When I tell you to run, you have to be quick and get going. Damn you all, how dare you bully my junior brother? I'll bring you into my dreams. Youngest junior brother, look, quick. Master is wearing flowery robes today. Su Ming looked at Hu Zi, and the memories surfaced in his mind. At that moment, Hu Zi rolled over, looking as if he thought that sleeping on his stomach would be more comfortable. The moment he changed positions, Su Ming's gaze immediately zoomed in on his back, and he saw dried specks of blood on the robes covering his back. He moved next to Hu Zi and lifted the robes covering his back. Then, on Hu Zi's back, he saw wounds with their flesh turned inside out. Those were wounds left behind by flogging. They were packed closely to each other. Some of them had formed scabs, but there were even more who had already turned into brown scars. When Su Ming saw all of them, the cave abode immediately turned cold, and an indescribably chilling killing intent appeared in his eyes. Chapter 542. Their Home Under the Sea. Su Ming remained silent, and after a long while, moved his gaze away from Hu Zi's back. At that moment, the chill in his heart had practically frozen over the sky. He would make those people suffer the pain Hu Zi had to bear 1,000,000 times over. If he did not do this, he would not be able to quell the pain in his heart. If he did not do this, he would not be able to force down the anger burning in his soul. He was angry, and that anger was burning so furiously that it had reached its peak, turning into a calm look on his face at that moment. However, once that anger under that calm facade erupted, it would be able to burn the world. Su Ming turned around quietly and looked at his master's cave abode. He swept his gaze around the area, and found it empty. He had come to this place before, and he knew that his master had left behind a large amount of items in the multiple floors in his cave that he had collected. Now, this floor was empty. In silence, Su Ming walked down to another floor. When he eventually walked through the entire cave, the sullen look on his face had fused with his anger, and it had turned into a terrifying, unsettling wave of ripples around him. His master's cave was practically empty. There were only a few items left behind, and the rest were all gone. Su Ming's heart clenched in pain. He walked out of the cave quietly and stood outside to look at the world in the distance. The words Hu Zi had said just moments ago echoed in his ears. His master often stood here and stared at the land of the shamans with a dejected look on his face. His master had gone to the land of the shamans in search of him, but he had been unable to find him. Master! Su Ming stood there and closed his eyes. A long time passed. When he opened his eyes, he walked down the mountain using a trail that now existed only in his memories. Eventually, rolling seawater appeared before him, but Su Ming did not stop there. He walked into the sea, and under the water, he saw the complete 9th summit. As grief filled his face, he walked through the seawater, right down to the submerged stairs of the 9th summit. This flight of stairs was originally covered in plants, and when he walked on those stairs, he should have felt as if he was stepping on dust. But Su Ming could see that the stairs were incredibly clean. It was clear that Hu Zi always came to this place to clean it. The memories in Su Ming's mind were incredibly clear, and they were overlapping with the desolate view his eyes perceived right then. He could even hear the faint sound of the high wind in his ears above the 9th summit, could even see his second senior brother standing on the stairs with the side of his face turned towards the sun while smiling towards him. The sorrow on Su Ming's face became deeper. It was quiet all around him. In the midst of that silence, he walked forward slowly, passing by Hu Zi's cave abode to reach his second senior brother's house. His house was incredibly neat and tidy, but submerged under the seawater. His herbal garden laid in waste. Second senior brother's smile, his figure, and his identity as a phantom appeared in Su Ming's heart, causing him to stop silently, and he stood there for a long, long time. Perhaps there were tears in his eyes, but they fused with the sea and he could not see them. Second senior brother. Su Ming turned around. On the way here, he saw many plants that had died in the sea. Those were all the marks his second senior brother had left behind. When Su Ming reached the foot of the 9th summit, he went to his eldest senior brother's isolation grounds. Over there, he went to the cast cave based on his memories that was now submerged in seawater. As he looked at the familiar place, his eldest senior brother's voice from the past appeared in his ears. The concern in his voice still sounded as strong as ever in his heart. Eldest senior brother. Su Ming mumbled in anguish. His eldest senior brother was a quiet and reserved man. He was a person of few words, and did not like speaking too much, but he cared for his junior brothers and his master deeply. After a long while, Su Ming left, dispirited. He walked through every single spot in the 9th summit, walked past every single mountain rock in his memories. Everything here carried his memories and the warmth he felt here in the past. Eventually, he came to his cave abode from all those years ago. He looked at the protruding platform, then at the dead plants that his second senior brother had planted after he left. And he sat down there quietly. He sat alone, on the 9th summit located in the depths of the sea, and looked into the distance. In his eyes, he saw murky seawater, but in his heart, he saw the frozen world from the past. The 9th summit was an ice mountain, and beneath this ice mountain was a true mountain. This mountain would not melt, it would never melt. Su Ming closed his eyes. As he sat there, his heart gained peace. It was just like in the past. However, now, his master's constant roars to the sky were gone, his eldest senior brother's divine sense covering him while he was in isolation was absent, and his second senior brother's warm and gentle smile was missing. Once so many things had vanished, could this still be considered the 9th summit? This is the 9th summit. This is my home in the land of South Morning, Su Ming declared under his breath. He was the only person in this endless seawater, and his presence stood out like a sore thumb as he sat on the platform. Yet his distinct presence shone with loneliness, longing, and reminiscence. What sort of longing would make a person defend the 9th summit without any care for the consequences? What sort of longing would make a person sit quietly at the depths of this lonely sea to search for the hints of the past? Master, I'm back. I came back to the 9th summit. I'm back home. Su Ming sat on the platform, just like he did in the past. As time passed, he continued sitting there, day by day. On the 3rd day, Su Ming opened his eyes and lifted his head. He looked towards the surface of the sea above his head, and a chilling look full of killing intent that surged into the sky appeared in his eyes. He stood up and walked back through the path he had come. Gradually, he emerged from the sea and walked up the stairs leading to the peak of the mountain. He arrived at the top, and heard Hu Zi's snores still traveling through the air. When he heard those sounds, the very first smile since Su Ming had entered the submerged 9th summit appeared on his lips. Senior brother Hu Zi, take a good rest. You have me to handle everything. Su Ming sat down cross-legged outside his master's cave abode on the mountain. The sea breeze lifted his hair and made his robes flap loudly in the air. His expression gradually turned cold and detached, and he closed his eyes. The bald crane was by his side. Over the past few days, it remained there, not daring to leave due to the seal on its body, and grumbling immensely in its heart because of it. However, when it saw Su Ming return from the depths of the sea and saw him sitting quietly outside the cave, it suddenly shuddered. It had noticed the killing intent within Su Ming's body. That killing intent burned so greatly that it surpassed what he possessed in Xianxia Island, making the bald crane's heart shudder and not dare to get closer to him. In fact, it could even see the air around Su Ming freezing through his divine abilities. The small snake crawled out of Su Ming's storage bag and lay sprawled across his shoulders. It had also noticed Su Ming's killing intent, and was hissing while staring at the sky coldly. Time trickled by slowly. 2 hours later, distortions suddenly appeared in the sky above the 9th summit, and from those distortions, 2 long arcs flew out and charged straight towards the 9th summit. Before they even got closer, a cold voice echoed in the air. "Time's up. Bring out the offerings and come with us to meet Sir Sai Ma. Once you receive the 9 punishment lashes, you can keep your 9th summit protected for another month." Su Ming opened his eyes, lifted his head, and looked towards the sky. Chapter 543, Freezing Sky Heaven Gate. Su Ming's face remained calm when that cold voice echoed in the air. However, that calmness around him was more terrifying than any sort of murderous aura, was even more frightening than any eruption of a cultivation base. This tranquility contained a power that could make others suffocate once they saw it. 2 long arcs charged through the sky to head straight towards the small bit of the 9th summit remaining above the sea, but before they managed to get any closer, the person in the left arc noticed something off. He saw that the person sitting on the 9th summit was no longer Hu Zi, but someone who looked somewhat familiar. However, there was something unfamiliar about that face as well, making him unable to recall where he'd seen it before. The other person also noticed Su Ming's presence. The 2 of them came to a halt in midair and floated above the 9th summit while looking at the mountain beneath them coldly. "Who are?" One of them frowned, but his expression was as cold and aloof as ever, and along that look on his face was a hint of arrogance that came from his status as a disciple from Heaven Gate. Yet before he could even finish speaking, Su Ming lifted his head, and the instant he opened his eyes, a chilling glare that seemed to have come from the abyss itself abruptly shone within his eyes. Right then, that disciple from Heaven Gate who was looking at Su Ming from midair suddenly heard a loud bang in his head, and his body started shivering violently. At that moment, he could practically hear thunder roaring in his head. Su Ming's gaze was like 2 sharp blades that had pierced into his eyes and shot straight to his head, causing him to feel as if his mind had instantly broken down. Then they rushed into his spirit, causing his heart to continue beating faster and faster with each passing moment until it was racing at lightning speed against his chest. Cracking sounds also came from his body at that moment, as if it was unable to withstand the will and pressure contained within Su Ming's gaze. The unparalleled fury contained in that gaze towards Heaven Gate erupted abruptly in that Heaven Gate disciple's body. His face turned pale in an instant, and his eyes became the first thing to explode. Blood poured out of them, and he staggered backwards before coughing up a large mouthful of blood. During that time, his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth started bleeding as well. He let out a shrill scream of pain as his spirit collapsed and his mind broke. Then, right at that moment, his life was extinguished by the pressure formed by the tranquil fury burning in Su Ming's eyes. With a bang, that Heaven Gate disciple fell head first into the sea, all while his companion watched, dumbfounded. However, before his body fell into the sea, a black shadow immediately shot out from the 9th summit. Naturally, that black shadow was the bald crane. At that moment, its eyes were sparkling with a brilliant light, and the few remaining feathers on its body were lustrous and glossy. With an excited expression on its face, it caught up with that plunging corpse in the span of a breath, and when it flew past the body, a storage bag appeared in its mouth, and there were even a few shining objects in its claws. If anyone took a closer look, they would be able to tell that those shining objects were the jade buttons on the dead Heaven Gate disciples' robes. What a waste! Such a waste! I'll just keep collecting these things a little at a time. If I continue like this, I'll be rich someday. The bald crane lifted its head in excitement and fixed its eyes on the other Heaven Gate disciple while expectation shone on its face. Su Ming's gaze could not kill, but if the pressure around his body fused with his gaze and his divine sense, then it would be enough to kill a person. The instant the Heaven Gate disciple died, his companion started shivering. His face instantly turned pale, and his gaze when he looked towards Su Ming was filled with shock. With a piercing scream, he started retreating hastily, thinking of returning to Heaven Gate as quickly as possible. His mind was in a mess. He could not imagine just what sort of power would be needed to kill his fellow disciple of his with just the pressure from a gaze. His companion had been about the same level as him. At that moment, the arrogance he had as a Heaven Gate disciple was gone, and the aloofness and disdain he had when he confronted Huzi were absent. Even his screams were no longer cold but filled with terror. The never-ending horror was like a tidal wave that drowned his heart and soul. At that moment, he had only one thought in his head: run. Run as fast as possible and return to Heaven Gate with the fastest speed he could muster. Kill those who have harmed even a single plant of Ninth Summit. Kill those who have harmed even a single follower of Ninth Summit. Kill all the berserkers of the tribe of the person who harmed even a single disciple of the Ninth Summit, Su Ming mumbled to himself calmly. He stood up and took a step towards the sky. When his foot landed, he abruptly appeared in the sky. The Ninth Summit protected me in the past. From now on, it will be my turn to protect the Ninth Summit. All of you from Heaven Gate have humiliated and hurt my senior brother. I will kill all of you. The killing intent in Su Ming's eyes burst forth swiftly, and he took another step forward to appear right before the fleeing Heaven Gate disciple. That disciple's soul had practically left his body from fear at that point. He fell to his knees, wanting to beg for mercy. He was afraid of death, especially when he had lived in safety during the calamity. It amplified his terror to a whole different level. However, Su Ming's right hand had already swept past the center of his brows almost the instant he fell to his knees, before he even managed to beg for his life. When Su Ming walked towards the sky, the Heaven Gate disciple started trembling, and a crack appeared at the center of his brows, ripping right through his skull. The top half of his head was torn off, along with his hair, and as blood gushed out from the remaining half, the top part fell into the ocean. The same scene appeared once again. The bald crane let out a few excited screeches and rushed over swiftly. When it returned, another storage bag and a few more buttons appeared in its claws. I'm rich. I'm rich. If the berserker child kills more, I will become richer. Hey, following him doesn't seem like such a bad idea. It was simply unfortunate for that Heaven Gate disciple. He had to die while in tattered garments as his body sank into the ocean. Right at the final moment of his life before he died, that disciple suddenly remembered why the stranger felt so familiar. In the midst of his terror, he had finally managed to recognize that person. He was the fourth disciple of the Ninth Summit, the disciple who had gone missing for 20-something years. Su Ming. The moment he recognized, his world turned dark, and he never woke up again. Huzi's snores were still traveling through the air. He had been far too exhausted for too many years, and with Su Ming's help, he would sleep for a long time, until his body was fully recovered. Perhaps, when he eventually woke up, everything in his sight would be different. Su Ming stood in midair. He had been waiting for those Heaven Gate disciples' arrival for the past few days because he had sent his divine sense to scan the sky a few days ago, but he had been unable to find any traces of any sort of rune whatsoever in the sky. That was why he waited. When the sky distorted and those two people appeared, he immediately noticed a single dot appearing in a single spot in the vast sky. Before he met Fang Kang Lan, Su Ming would not have been able to recognize that wand. But now, with just one glance, he could tell that it was a dimensional realm locus. The instant he noticed it, he took a third step, and right when his foot landed, he moved into the dimensional realm locus. When he stepped there, everything he saw turned chaotic for a brief instant, but he had already sent his divine sense sweeping through all directions. Without even needing his eyes, he could sense that he had landed on some sort of relocation spot. When his vision became clear, he found himself standing on a gigantic rune. Outside it were 9 huge stone pillars, and there were all sorts of different bizarre-looking creatures carved on them. 9 people sat cross-legged on top of those pillars. The sky was blue. There was no sun up ahead, but light was still shining on the ground. When Su Ming looked into the distance, he could see mountain ranges rising and falling up ahead. There were long arcs weaving through the white clouds in the sky. Birds chirped, and the beautiful fragrance of flowers filled every corner of the air. The spiritual aura in this place was incredibly thick, and there were quite a large number of precious medicinal herbs planted on the ground. Green could be seen everywhere, and anyone who saw all of these things would be struck by a feeling that this place was the paradise itself. Tranquility and serenity filled this beautiful world. 9 gigantic stones could be seen floating in the sky. Those stones were in the shape of a cone, their pointed ends facing the ground. On the flat surfaces above were palaces built in a variety of styles. The 9 of them were like the most supreme beings in this world. They floated high in the sky, and the long arcs weaving in and out of the clouds were mostly moving about those 9 palaces. Faint sounds of running water could be heard in the air as well. It came from a long river running through the grounds. The sounds of it were accompanied by the sounds of women giggling and playing. Occasionally, some birds would fly through the sky elegantly. They looked incredibly beautiful and did not look like ferocious beasts, but were like pets that had been tamed. The sky was clear and blue, a stark contrast to the world outside, causing the people who saw it to be unable to help themselves but be hypnotized by the sight. At the center of the 9 floating palaces in the sky was a mountain that reached the clouds. There was a big stone plate erected on it, one that could be seen clearly even from the distance. There were 4 golden words carved on it, and they were glowing with endless light, causing all the people in the place to be able to see them the moment they lifted their heads. Freezing Sky Heaven Gate. This was Freezing Sky Clan's Heaven Gate. Before Su Ming arrived in here, he had very limited knowledge about this place, but now, with the experiences he had accumulated, he was able to tell with just one glance that this was a fragmented dimension. This place did not belong to South Morning. It was just a fragmented dimension that might have developed on its own or had been discovered by chance. Perhaps this place was not even part of the land of the Berserkers, because the moment Su Ming placed his feet on the ground here, a faint aura of death immediately started spreading out from his body. It was incredibly similar to the moment when he left Yin Death's region in the ancient bronze sword and his blood landed on Fang Kang Lan's finger. But this was much weaker. It was not strong at all, and was nothing compared to the time he left the ancient bronze sword. Yet all of this clearly told Su Ming that this was a mysterious dimension located between Yin Death and Bright Yang. The spread of the aura of death from Su Ming's body upon his appearance was something that simply could not fit with this dimensional world, even though it was very faint. Because of that, the instant he appeared in the rune, the aura of death from his body turned to black smoke, and as it tumbled about, it rose into the sky, causing a small part of it to be shrouded by a black fog, as if someone had spilled ink on a piece of paper. Chapter 544. A Family. Almost the moment Su Ming stepped into the rune, he spread his divine sense outward and saw everything else within Heaven Gate. He also managed to sense several powerful waves of ripples within this place. He could not hide the aura of death coming from his body. It rose into the sky to turn into black fog. That black fog looked ferocious, as if it was an evil spirit that was moving to devour everything around it. Some fine wrinkles gradually appeared on Su Ming's originally youthful face, making him seem to have turned into a middle-aged man. The 9 people who were meditating while sitting on the 9 stone pillars around him opened their eyes at the same time, and shock appeared on their faces. In an instant, their gazes fell on Su Ming, who stood at the center of the rune. The moment they saw him, all of them stood up. "Who are you? You are only asking for death if you trespass into Heaven Gate." Su Ming lifted his head. The moment he met the gazes of those 9 people, 3 of them took a step forward and charged towards him. Before they even came close, divine abilities appeared in the air, and as all sorts of lights in various colors filled the space around Su Ming, they closed in on him in the blink of an eye. Su Ming remained calm, but the killing intent in his eyes was as strong as ever. He took a step forward and instantly arrived before one of the 3 men. The moment he walked past that person, he had already tapped the center of his brows with his finger. He moved too fast, so fast that before the people around him managed to see what was happening, the man who was tapped between his brows started shivering and his head exploded with a bang. With a warp, Su Ming rose to mid-air. Behind him was black fog, and above him was even more black fog, roaring as it spread outwards. His appearance was akin to an apocalyptic storm raging in a serene world. I, the 9th Summit's disciple, Su Ming, am here to ask all of you in Heaven Gate one question. Do you know about the 9th Summit's principles for blood? He asked calmly, but his words sounded like thunder roaring, and his voice rumbled in the air within Heaven Gate. That booming voice was deafening to the ears, and it even turned into an endless wave of echoes that spread to the entire area. You stole my master's items, tortured my senior brother, and threatened the ninth summit's existence. Today, I, the ninth summit's disciple, Su Ming, will take my master's place, and on behalf of my eldest senior brother and my second senior brother, I will make Heaven Gate pay." That last word exploded in the air, and during that instant, the 8 people on the ground rushed out with gritted teeth. But the moment they charged forth, Su Ming lifted his right hand and seized in the direction downwards. The ground trembled. The 8 people were all berserkers in the bone sacrifice realm. At that moment, their bodies stopped as if they had frozen up, and the berserker bones in their bones exploded with a bang at the same time, as if they could no longer bear with the pressure. Su Ming then clenched his fist, and as the bodies of the 8 people broke down, wisps of white smoke seeped out of them, and Su Ming caught them in his hand. The white ball of threads he held in his hand was the fusion of these 8 people's life force and their cultivation base, but Su Ming did not know a way to absorb this strength. If he took it in forcefully, his body would start showing signs of instability. That was why he would never absorb these white threads when killing in the past. When he held this ball of life force, a glint appeared in his eyes, and at that moment, the whole Heaven Gate was shaken due to the change in the sky, the reverberating booms, and also Su Ming's words. Long arcs shot up into the sky and charged towards him from all directions. These long arcs were all people from Heaven Gate. There were also people flying out from the 9 floating palaces in the sky. Their numbers were dense, and at that moment, piercing howls shook the sky and earth as long arcs sliced through the air in this small world that belonged to Heaven Gate. Kill all and spare none of those who trespass into Heaven Gate. How dare you trespass into freezing sky Heaven Gate? Ninth Summit, Su Ming. The appearance of those long arcs was accompanied by furious shouts. Su Ming merely looked on as they closed in on him, and as he did so, he found that the weakest among these arcs were at the later stage of the awakening realm, and most of them were in the bone sacrifice realm. There were even 3 powerful berserkers among them who were in the berserker soul realm, and they were all closing in on him with dark expressions on their faces. Su Ming remained calm and cast a glance at the ball of threads in his right hand. A flicker of light shone in his eyes, and he had all his divine sense spread out of his body. The shadow of his nascent divinity also appeared behind him, and when he appeared, he lifted his right hand and formed a seal. Once that seal was made, the nascent divinity immediately changed the shape of his hands, and in an instant, he formed 9 different seals to form one complete. "I grant you the crimson eyes of the night," Su Ming said lightly, then waved his arm in the direction of the sky. The moment he did so, his nascent divinity instantly turned a little dimmer, but his eyes remained as aloof and detached as ever. When he waved his arm, 2 crimson lights appeared in the black fog formed by aura of death spreading out in the sky. Those 2 crimson lights were like shining stars. The instant they appeared, a powerful, mighty pressure swiftly spread out from within the black fog to cover the ground as it continued spreading outwards. All the long arcs that were surrounded by that pressure immediately found their bodies forcefully frozen in midair, and their expressions changed drastically. "I grant you the violet lips of the sky." Su Ming's voice was soft, but it still managed to land in all the people's ears, causing their minds to shudder. The nascent divinity formed another 9 seals with his right hand and pushed towards the ground. The ground trembled furiously, and since this place was originally a fragmented dimension to begin with, no cracks tore through the ground when those tremors appeared, but ripples that looked like those when a stone was thrown into a lake spread out in an instant and started echoing in the area. Rays of light began shining from those ripples. The ground turned transparent under that light, and almost in the blink of an eye, it disappeared right before all the people's eyes. In its place was a brightly lit sky. The earth had turned into the sky. The execution of this divine ability caused Su Ming's nascent divinity to become dimmer. This was a sealing art that originally belonged to Hong Luo, and even though Su Ming could cast it, he could not bring it up to Hong Luo's level and seal end shamans. Yet even so, with Su Ming's current level of cultivation, when he executed the sealing art, day and night, he could seal all those below the Berserker Soul realm. The entire land disappeared and turned into the sky, causing the long arcs that were charging towards him to be astonished by this change, and immediately, they discovered to their shock and terror that their bodies had been frozen. They could not even move a single inch. At that moment, the Heaven Gate disciples that were closest to Su Ming were less than 1,000 feet away from him, but that distance felt like a ravine separating heaven and earth. They could not cross it. With one divine ability, he sealed heaven and earth. Su Ming remained as composed as ever as his nascent divinity returned to his side. To his front, his back, his left, his right, and everywhere around him were people numbering to nearly 1,000 standing in midair. Their faces were pale and terror-stricken as they looked towards him. At that moment, all the frozen Heaven Gate disciples and those who had not managed to fly out and had seemed to have disappeared but were actually blocked off from that space as if they were isolated in another dimension cast their gazes to Su Ming. His words were still echoing in their heads as they looked at his face. The Heaven Gate disciples who had once seen him before started gradually associating his name with that one person from their memories all those years ago. Su Ming. He's that person from the 9th summit. That Su Ming who fought against Sir Sai Ma all those years ago. That's why I said not to provoke the 9th summit. All the people there are lunatics. All sorts of thoughts rose in the people's hearts, but because their bodies were frozen to the point that even their breathing seemed to have halted, these words could only echo in their hearts. They could not give their thoughts voice. Su Ming might have sealed these Heaven Gate disciples, but there were 3 powerful berserkers in the berserker soul realm among the long arcs. They only felt the air around them becoming heavy and sticky, but they could still move. However, none of them were the least bit happy that they could move. Terror crashed into their hearts like a tidal wave, and the 3 of them no longer moved forward, but chose to retreat. This divine ability surpassed their imagination, and the terror of 9th summit from their memories returned to them in that instant. Almost the moment these 3 people began retreating, Su Ming calmly took a step forward. His foot landed on thin air, but the 3 retreating berserkers felt their hearts give a loud thump against their chests. It was as if Su Ming had just stepped on their hearts. That one step looked normal, but the instant Su Ming's foot landed, the trio's retreating bodies immediately froze, and that momentary pause in their movements meant death. Su Ming swiftly appeared before one of them, and clenching his right hand into a fist, he hurled a punch straight at the powerful berserker's chest. That one punch immediately made this person cough up blood. As his body tumbled backwards, terror appeared on his face, and he let out a roar. However, almost the moment he roared and blood poured out from every orifice of his body, Su Ming threw another punch. The instant he did so, that berserker in the berserker soul realm who was a superior existence to the rest of the Heaven Gate disciples let out a piercing scream of pain and his body exploded and he turned into blood fog. Before he died, he suffered pain that far surpassed what he could bear. Su Ming's first punch had crushed all his bones, turning them into an innumerable amount of bone spikes that tore through his heart and the passages of his qi, but he remained alive. When the second punch landed, his blood started flowing in reverse. His body was like a sack filled with sharp needles, and if anyone struck him with a huge force, those needles would pierce through that sack, causing the powerful berserker from Heaven Gate to be shredded by the crushed bone spikes in his body, which meant he died a painful and horrible death. Su Ming might be cold when he killed other people, but he was not the sort of person who would torture people until they died. He only did this because there was a bone necklace around the person's neck which he then yanked away the instant the person died due to his second punch. It was one of Xianxia's personal belongings. With the bone necklace in hand, Su Ming turned his head around and looked towards the 2 other powerful berserkers in the berserker soul realm who were fleeing in shock. He took a step towards them. "Master, save me!" One of the 2 people running away let out a scream in despair as his heart trembled in fear, because he saw Su Ming coming towards him. The instant his screams for help echoed in the air, a voice came from the 3rd palace that was floating in the sky in silence, and that voice was filled with wariness. "Sir, you are a disciple of the 9th summit, and you are family to us in Heaven Gate." "Family?" Su Ming laughed coldly. Chapter 545, Irreconcilable. Before the voice from the 3rd palace could finish speaking, Su Ming let out a cold bark of laughter and appeared beside the person who had pleaded for help. He lifted his right hand to seize that berserker, and since that person knew that all his divine abilities were useless, he roared, deciding to burn his cultivation base and self-destruct. Yet the moment he prepared to self-destruct, Su Ming's right hand suddenly shone with violet light, and violet armor appeared to cover his entire right arm and hand. He pierced through the flames coming from this person's self-destruction and seized his throat. "We're not family." As Su Ming stated that flatly, he added strength to his grip, and with a bang, The powerful berserker in his grasp was reduced to only flesh and blood. When he released his grip, the man's mangled body fell downwards, but a white bracelet flew out from his corpse into Su Ming's palm. Su Ming cast a glance at the bracelet. He remembered that this item had also been placed in his master's cave abode in the past. When he held the bracelet, the killing intent in his heart burned even more furiously. He lifted his head and looked at the final berserker in the berserker soul realm running away from him. He was a clan elder, and he was already close to the first palace. Su Ming took a step forward, but the moment he lifted his foot, an old man in white robes walked out from the third palace. The old man looked at Su Ming with a complicated expression on his face. He had seen Su Ming before. At that time, he had been in the auction and had seen the young berserker along with the young lord from the great tribe of Freezing Sky 1. At that time, the young lord had wanted to win Su Ming over. 20 years had passed by since then, and times had changed. When the old man saw Su Ming again, the shock he had made him unable to calm himself down even after such a long time had passed. Su Ming, you are a disciple of the 9th summit. Why must you do this? You may be strong now, but don't forget who took you in when you were still weak. It was Freezing Sky Clan, it was. As the old man in white walked forward, he spoke darkly. His heart was in great shock. Su Ming's power, his strange divine abilities, and especially the scene where he sealed heaven and earth had made him incredibly wary. This sort of person should have originally been part of Freezing Sky Clan, but now, he had become their enemy. It pained him to see this, and at the same time, he began sighing in his heart. But before he could finish speaking, Su Ming lifted his head and looked towards him. It's the 9th summit that took me in, he said calmly. When his foot landed, he had already arrived next to the fleeing old berserker in the berserker soul realm. When shock and despair appeared on his face, a cold harumph came from the first palace. Immediately, the door to that palace flew open with a bang, and a dark ray of light instantly flew out to charge toward Su Ming. A power at the peak of the middle stage of the berserker soul realm erupted from that dark light, and there was a small cauldron contained within it. That cauldron spun rapidly and charged towards Su Ming. A glint appeared in Su Ming's eyes, and as he waved his arm, his medicinal cauldron manifested immediately to crash into that incoming cauldron with a loud bang. As that bang echoed in the air, Su Ming took a step forward. When the clan elder began fleeing once again, Su Ming moved past him to stand on the platform to the first palace. The clan elder in the berserker soul realm shivered, and banging sounds came from his body. When he coughed up blood, a small snake crawled out of his mouth and flew up while hissing. It looked at its surroundings with a cold, dark glare. That small snake was, naturally, Su Ming's candle dragon. Its eyes were cold and merciless. All of the living beings in this world were just food in its eyes. Only when it looked towards Su Ming would gentleness appear in its eyes, and subservience would appear in its actions. The instant Su Ming landed on the platform to the first palace, an old woman walked out from within. Sinister intent could be seen on her face. She held a cane with a dragon head in her hand, and when she slammed it on the ground, the dragon head started moving as if it had resuscitated, and started roaring towards Su Ming. The old woman lifted her left hand at the same time, and there was a ring on her finger. When Su Ming it, the killing intent in his eyes started shining brilliantly. That ring belonged to his master. The old woman bit the tip of her tongue and coughed up a mouthful of blood on the ring. That blood fused within it in an instant, and soon after, a low roar came inside, along with a layer of black fog. It then instantly turned into a big hand that went on to seize Su Ming. The old man in white from the third palace also took a step forward right then and lifted his right hand. Immediately, the air before him started distorting. As thunder rumbled in the air, a long sword with lightning sparks on its blade appeared. It swept through the air, and immediately, the entire sky seemed to have turned into a lightning lake that had an endless supply of lightning, and along with that sword, it charged towards Su Ming. A sigh traveled out of the second palace soon after, and it instantly turned into an illusion before disappearing, revealing a person surrounded by red fog sitting within. The person slowly stood up, and when he looked towards Su Ming, he took a step forward and turned into a layer of red fog before charging towards him. These three people's level of cultivation was already extremely close to the later stage of the berserker soul realm, but while they might be extremely close, that remaining distance might sometimes be a ravine that was incredibly difficult to breach, and in the end, they were still merely berserkers in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm. There were 9 lords in Heaven Gate, and there were also 9 lords in the Great Plains. These 3 people were clearly the 3 of the 9 lords of Heaven Gate. Su Ming remembered that his master had once mentioned that there was 1 lord missing from Heaven Gate, and they only had 8 lords at the moment. There were also missing lords in the Great Plains. So this is the standard of the lords in Heaven Gate. You are nothing, Su Ming said flatly. He might not have killed many of those in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm, but there were also quite a number of those who had died in his hands. The instant the trio's divine abilities closed in on him, an endless amount of fine violet threads seeped out of Su Ming's body. As he stood there, they surrounded him entirely, turning into the Undertakers of evil armor. When he lifted his right hand, the Undertakers of evil spear manifested. The instant that long spear appeared, murderous aura surged into the sky and filled the entire place. A thick, bloody stench spread through the area. That bloody stench formed a bloodthirsty aura that roiled as if there were numerous vengeful spirits within it, shrieking and howling, surrounding Su Ming's spear, unable to escape. A large amount of these vengeful spirits were the savages from Scour Siv Island. The moment the Undertakers of evil armor appeared, it would not disappear without tasting blood. The manifestation of that armor meant that Su Ming's rampage was about to begin. He swept the long spear across, and the instant those 3 people closed in, he turned into a violet shadow. As the aura of death spread out from his body, as the rolling black fog stretched out to fill the sky, as the pair of crimson eyes that looked like stars in the black fog started shining in a strange, enchanting light, the trio appeared right before him. A loud bang that shook the sky and earth reverberated in the air, and as a powerful force spread out swiftly through the area, the old woman coughed up blood and was forced back several hundreds of feet. She coughed up blood once again, and shock along with disbelief appeared on her face. The later stage of the berserker soul realm. She had been unable to determine Su Ming's level of cultivation previously, and while she might be wary of his strange divine abilities, in her mind, he was still only at the middle stage of the berserker soul realm, even if he had received some sort of serendipity. After all, only 20 years had passed since the last time she saw him. Yet now, after exchanging blows with him, she discovered to her shock that everything had surpassed her expectations. Almost the moment she started tumbling backwards, the old man in white also fell back. He staggered a few hundred feet back and started bleeding from his eyes, ears, nose, and mouth. Vicious coughs wrecked his body, and as he coughed, a red thread crawled out from his right hand before crawling back in within an instant. A red flush appeared on his face, and though he was in pain, his gaze locked on Su Ming became increasingly more complicated. The person who had turned into red fog also fell back. The fog collapsed, but it gathered up once again to turn into a person whose head was filled with red but whose body looked like a statue. He stood there and looked at Su Ming quietly. He was apathetic, but there was conflict hidden underneath that apathetic expression. The instant Su Ming saw that red-haired person, his pupils shrank.
CK.
The red-haired person was clearly Xianxia. When he heard Su Ming's voice, the man immediately started trembling, and the conflict in his eyes became stronger. But Xianxia had not even reached the bone sacrifice realm when they had parted in the past. Yet now, the power he showed was in the middle stage of the berserker soul realm. This immediately put a frown between Su Ming's brows. With just a glance, he could tell that something was wrong with Xianxia. His body was no longer made of flesh and blood, but was like a statue. He looked just like a statue of the god of berserkers. At the same time, the wave of ripples that had spread out due to the crash between the 4 people just now had touched the other palaces around the area. The instant they touched them, Su Ming immediately saw the remaining 6 palaces breaking down, and all of them shattered to dust. Once they shattered, he found that there was no one in those 6 palaces. That scene was filled with a strange air, causing the entire Heaven Gate to be filled with a strange atmosphere as well. However, Su Ming also immediately noticed the frozen Heaven Gate disciples around him looking shocked and confused when they found out that the remaining palaces were empty. "Master, leave, this place is." At that moment, Xianxia suddenly started shouting loudly, but before he managed to finish his words, several red threads immediately crawled out of his eyes before crawling in once again. Frenzied killing intent appeared in his eyes once again. "Since you're here, then why leave in such a hurry? Su Ming. I'll be waiting for you at the 9th layer. I hope you will have the chance to come up here, and I will kill you with my own hands." A soft and dark voice abruptly came from the sky, and a vortex appeared in the portion of the sky that had yet to be filled by black fog. As that vortex spun, a vast expanse of land appeared. "By the way, Bai Su is also here, and if you don't kill me within an hour, that senior brother of yours, who Zi, was it? He'll end up the same as Zi Che. Also, you have an old friend here, and he really wants to fight against you. Su Ming, I've been waiting for this day for too long. I've always been waiting for you to come back. I will make you suffer slowly, and I will return to you all the pain I had to endure by thousandfold. I am the true god of berserkers." As that voice echoed in the air, a chilling air could be felt contained within it, and that voice belonged to Sai Ma Xin. The moment that voice appeared, the rune to leave Heaven Gate collapsed with a bang. At the same time, the sleeping Huzi did not notice that the scars on his back had torn apart, and there were red threads crawling in and out of his back while he remained asleep on the 9th summit outside Heaven Gate. This was something even Su Ming had not noticed before he left. The game has started. Su Ming, I look forward to this so much. Sai Ma Xin's voice became even softer, making those who heard it to be unable to tell whether he was a man or a woman. But the hatred contained within towards Su Ming felt as if it had been engraved into his soul, and it was an irreconcilable hate.